Listening to Bad Dog Agility, bringing you training tips, interviews, and news about the great sport of dog agility.
I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 226. Today's podcast is brought to you by hititboard.com. Hititboard.com has the innovative training tools you need for agility. Having problems with the dog walker A-frame? The Hititboard can fix that. Your dog doesn't like tugging? They'll love the Tug It. Can't move your A-frame around by yourself? The Move It can. Go to hititboard.com and use discount code BDA10 to get 10% off your order. That's hititboard.com. Today's podcast is also brought to you by 1TDC.com. Dog agility can be hard on your dog's body. Help keep their joints and muscles healthy with 1TDC. 1-tetradecanol complex is a clinically studied blend of unique fatty acid oils that can support your dog's joint health. 1TDC promotes a healthy inflammatory response from head to tail. All of our listeners will automatically qualify for a great 1TDC special offer by purchasing online at BDA1TDC.com. That's BDA, the number 1TDC.com. Today, Jennifer and I are going to be talking about sequential versus parallel training. And I guess we'll start by defining what we mean by that. We're talking about whether it is better to train one skill from beginning to end until it is mastered before moving on to the next skill, or whether it is better to train multiple skills in parallel and split your session into multiple smaller sessions covering multiple skills. And this came to us as a question from one of our students who was talking about when they're training in really short sessions, is it better to work on one skill until it improves, or does the dog have a harder time focusing when there isn't enough variety to make it interesting for them? And we thought there are a lot of things to consider when we think about how we structure our training and specifically how we build skills in an agility dog. And the really short answer that Jennifer and I both came to is that it depends, and that this is kind of where the art of dog training comes in. But even though there's not a clear-cut answer, there are some very clear factors that you can take into account that will help you come to the right decision for you and your dog. I think that when we talk about building skills, one of my first thoughts was there are definitely certain skills in agility that I do like to really try to build the skill in as short of a period of time to really work on that understanding for my dog. And the one that immediately comes to mind for me, and Jennifer, you can tell me how you feel about this particular bit of training, but that is weave pull training. I find that when I'm going to teach my dog the weave pulls, once I start, I kind of want to make that the focus of most of my sessions, with the caveat that I don't want to exhaust my dog physically or mentally, but I want to make that the focus and really progress that skill rather quickly. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that weaving is a very physically taxing thing for the dogs. And so when I go out and I'm going to work on weaves, I can't do very many at one time. And if I constantly have a long gap between this session that I'm working on and my last session, I usually spend the bulk of my dog's time that they're physically able to perform the weaves and perform them at speed, kind of bringing them back up to the level that they stopped at in the last session. And so then you can feel like you're not really making any progress. You spent all of your time just trying to remind your dog about how this weave game works, and you didn't really get to push the skill, push your angles or start to really close up the weaves if that's how you're training them. And so it's really hard to make progress. Whereas when you have more sessions in a shorter period of time, then you don't have to do so much reminding of your dog. Do you kind of find that to be true, Jennifer, when you're doing weave pulls?
Yeah, when this question came up, the first obstacle that came to my mind as well was the weave pulls. And I think a lot of that, for me, kind of goes back to Susan Garrett and her original idea of 12 weave pulls in 12 days. I remember that was the title of the DVD or somewhere printed in an article. And that's exactly how I would train him. I would wait until the dog was physically and mentally mature. And when it was time to teach weave pulls, exactly as you said, I would do them in a lot of short sessions. But when I knew I had multiple days in a row that I could focus on weaves, and we weren't doing a lot of other skills during those times, right? So if I had, a good amount of time to go dedicate to them, I maybe wasn't progressing on other things, but I really wanted to focus on a lot of progress on those in a short period of time. So I 100% agree that the weave pulls are one of the first ones that come to mind for me as well.
And I think one of the things about weave pull training specifically that makes this important is that for most people, when they train weave pulls, the vast majority of people are going to train weave pulls using either channels or using something like 2x2s, where you're doing a little bit more of a shaping of the behavior. And when you do that, a lot of the intermediate training is not regulation, let's say. You're spending a lot of time with weaves open, for instance, and you don't want your dog to have months and months and months of exposure to open weaves. Because then it becomes much harder to close them. So you really want to progress that skill pretty quickly and get to regulation weaves so that you don't build improper muscle memory. And I think
we see this, sorry.
That's okay.
I think we can see this a little bit with some jumping skills as well. I know that for my guys, when I actually go to kind of focus on jump training, so not stuff that's handling related, not stuff that's speed related where I'm doing lower bars, but when I'm actually ready to say, okay, you're old enough physically, your growth plates are closed, you're mentally mature enough, I'm going to actually teach you to jump and get up to your height. I try to do so relatively quickly for the same thing. I don't want to spend too much time jumping. I'll use high five as an example at a lower jump height where she can learn a lot of maybe less desirable habits of jumping really flat. So the jumping was kind of the other one that I will often wait a little longer in terms of age. And then when I'm ready to do it, try to get them up pretty close, not necessarily full jump height, but pretty close pretty quickly so that she's not doing months and months and months of running full courses at 8-inch jumps and then struggling when I want to put her up to 20.
Mm-hmm. And I had the same thought with the running contacts that, if you're running a dog over a really low dog walk, you want to try to move that dog walk up as the progression permits, but you want to try to do it quickly so that you don't have a dog that spent 2 years running an 8-inch dog walk. And then when you have that much harder of a time getting them to figure out their striding as you raise it up. So those are some of the things that immediately came to mind for when I would train in sequence. But I think my default really for most things is to train a lot more in parallel. And I do that for a couple of reasons. I think that mental fatigue is a big one. So I think that I think dogs learn better when they have many shorter sessions, but we have a lot of skills to teach our dog. And so one thing that we can do, I guess it's a little bit cheating, is we can make our sessions shorter, but we can also kind of back-to-back short sessions on different skills, especially when they're very different. I think when you, let's say you're doing a running contacts and then you go inside and you do some core work, this very static, that's something that's more thoughtful. I think that then you can get a lot of great response from your dog. And I think some of the things that you want to think about when you're mixing skills is, one is physical fatigue. So if I'm doing something very physical like running contacts or weaves, then if I have another session or if I continue that session and I want to work on another skill, I'm going to choose a skill that isn't so physically taxing, but something that my dog still needs to know. And the same goes for mental fatigue. If I'm doing something that really the dog really has to figure out and it's very mentally difficult for the dog, I don't want to turn around and pair it with something else that's very mentally difficult. I want to give their brain a break and maybe do something that maybe that's something that's more like a trick or a game, or something that might have some other benefit, like rear end awareness, or being sensitized to noise, or even just socialization. Especially, Jennifer and I both have young dogs, so we think a lot about you have to plan training around learning to live with life when you have a puppy. And so you can often pair skill work with just exposure to different things.
This just happened in a lesson I had yesterday, actually, a 10-month-old dog, and we were just doing 30 minutes. And she came in, we talked a little bit, got some updated on the progress, and I basically outlined, and we were going to do 4 skills. And I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a thoughtful task. And then we're going to do something what I call fast and fun. And then we're going to do a third thoughtful task. And then we're going to do fast and fun. And then we're giving the puppy a break. And we did that all in a little bit less than 30 minutes. So I don't think the dogs need to be out for 30 minutes, certainly. But exactly as you said, bouncing back and forth between thinking, having to problem solve, having to almost kind of more the mental part. And then we went and we did some fast stuff that was a little bit more thoughtless, kept high energy, then came back to thinking, back to fun. For example, if you have a dog that's maybe a little bit worried about the teeter, you don't want to go out and do, okay, we're going to do start lines and work on stays. And then we're going to go over and we're going to do teeters. And then we're going to go do 2 on 2 off. And then we're going to sit on the ground and shape jumping. That doesn't sound fun for anybody, the trainer, the handler, the dog. So you might do some restrained recalls, or some fast recalls through tunnels or tunnel skills with a toy, then go do your teeter, then return back to, again, things more running, low jumps, and some running down some sequences or reps or something like that. So how you just mentioned your mentality to kind of be more parallel is exactly what I find myself doing more frequently, and even suggesting just as frequent as yesterday in a private lesson. So I think kind of what we're seeing is when it comes to obstacle performance, when we're teaching a specific obstacle, maybe more sequential. The examples we gave were the running contacts, the jump training, and the weave poles. But when it comes to maybe looking at other skills that could be incorporated as more handling based. I believe the example from our VIPer was the case of a rear cross and working rear crosses to keep them, bouncing back and forth to keep things exciting for both dog and handler. I know for me teaching, I do a lot of what I refer to as compare and contrast exercises. So in the case of a rear cross, one concern I have is, okay, if we're just going to go out for 5 minutes and the only thing we're going to do is rear crosses, what is the potential that maybe after the 3rd rep, the dog is just patterning the exercise? Or say it's going to be tunnel discriminations. Okay, they learned after the 3rd rep, oh, it's the right end. So what I like to do with kind of this bouncing back and forth is, you're working multiple skills, but you're also making sure the dog's really understanding and learning versus patterning. So, I approach a jump, rear cross, forward send. Make sure the dog wasn't just patterned to turning away from me, but that they did know that when the pressure towards them was not there, they should turn towards me. And now I'm kind of working 2 things. I'm working the rear cross, I'm working the forward send. I'm doing a little compare and contrast, and I'm keeping everybody thinking.
Exactly. That's a point I definitely wanted to make. We do the same thing with acceleration and deceleration, with threadles and not threadles. All of these skills usually have counterparts, and just as you said, there are so many times when people think that their dog has learned a skill and they're so excited, but the dog has just learned in that context. They've learned that today is threadle day. That's what they learned. They didn't learn the actual threadle handling. And so switching it up is really useful in those cases. I think when we do look at doing multiple sessions on the same skill, over a short period of time, like the weaves, one thing that you do want to watch out for is stalling out. So I think that if you're stalling out, you probably want to take a break from that skill and reevaluate. And you need to do 2 things. You need to give your dog a chance to think it over. We did a whole podcast on latent learning, and the more dogs I work with, the more it's just so clear that latent learning is such a real phenomenon. And in very short terms, because we do have a whole podcast on it, latent learning is just the learning that happens when you're not actively teaching. So you go out and you work on your dog on something, and they look like they didn't get it. And then you come out for the second session 2 days later, and they've made a huge leap when you haven't trained anything. They just needed time to sort it out in their brains. And it happens so much. It is a very real phenomenon. And so sometimes you do have to give your dogs those chances. So if you're stalling out, it's not bad at all to take a break from whatever skill you're working on. Give your dog a chance to have some latent learning. Also give yourself a chance to evaluate what you're doing and make sure that you don't need to make any changes to your plan, and then come back out and see what you've got. I think on the flip side, if you are working on a skill and not very often and you're not progressing, you need to think about hitting that skill more often and not making it that phenomenon where every time you go out, you're just kind of rehashing the same parts of the skill over and over again.
So we talk about the art of dog training and kind of not really having a cookie cutter formula for this. And I think another factor to look at is where you're at in your training journey. So not just necessarily the age of the dog, but the point in their training. And the two examples I want to use are kind of the extreme ends of the spectrum. I have High Five. Today's her birthday. So she's 1 year old. And I feel like with her, so much of our training right now is very parallel training because there's so much that we're working on right now. She's doing her jump training. She's doing her contacts. We're working on start line stays. We just started weaves. So when I go out, it's a little bit of everything because I feel like there's so much to tackle right now. Where with Swift, kind of on the other end of the spectrum, he's, 6 years old. We're a pretty gelled team. I know what our strengths and what our weaknesses are. So when I go out to train with him, it's very concentrated. It's very focused. I'm 3 weeks away from the World Championships. I know those last 2 or 3 things that we're working on. There's a couple specific skills that I'm beginning to get a little nervous should I see. So my training sessions almost always are dictated around those. So for him, we're very much revisiting a lot of the same stuff over until I really feel like I could see these on a course, step to the line, and really be able to nail them. And that's just the nature of him being a little bit older, us being a little bit more connected. I know what his strengths are, and I really can pinpoint the focal points of our training. So a lot of with him is going out and working on those very specific skills that I'm hoping to narrow down in the next few weeks.
Awesome. And when we talk about the AWC, the Agility World Championship, I did want to take just a second to let people know that we have the AWC Experience online course coming up. This is something that we did last year, and Jennifer was part of it, and she'll be part of it this year too. Last year we followed 3 handlers, 1 from each height. We had Tobias Woost, we had Jennifer Crank, and we had Jessica Patterson as small, medium, and large. And they did a self-analysis of all of their runs from the Agility World Championship. So you get to hear straight from their mouth what their plan was, how it went, how the execution worked, where things went right, where things went wrong. And we are going back to Finland this year and doing the same thing this year with the addition of Bad Dog Agility sponsored athlete Sarah Baker. So we're going to have 2 large dogs, Jessica Patterson and Sarah Baker with hops. And we will be having all of their runs and analysis of all of their runs. So that is not yet available, but it will be very soon. So I want people to keep their eyes open for it. And if you're not on our mailing list, you can join the mailing list at baddogagility.com on the sidebar. And so in wrapping up, I just hope that we have given people different things to think about, different ways to consider how you're structuring your training, what skills for you and your dog make the most sense to pair up, and what skills make the most sense to really spend some concentrated time on. And also to let you know that there is no right or wrong answer, but you do need to watch your dog, watch how they're doing physically, mentally, and how the 2 of you are enjoying the entire training experience, because that's a really important piece too. If you're enjoying it, you're going to get out there more often. If your dog's enjoying it, it's more likely that they're going to be successful. So all of those things come together to have some really great training sessions with your dog as you try to teach them this incredibly complex game of dog agility. And that's it for this week's podcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors, hititboard.com, 1TDC.com, and also NTI Global. End of summer sale, your last chance to take advantage of these super savings. Visit shop.ntiglobal.com for the widest selection of dog agility tunnels for both competition and backyard training. Known for free shipping, more options, high-quality products, and low prices, NTI Global has got you covered. They also offer tamer and anchor weight bags along with a full line of accessories and agility storage solutions. Need your agility gear in a hurry? Don't forget to check the in-stock selection. Visit shop.ntiglobal.com and use promo code AUGUSTSALE19 for 5% savings off today. Promo code good through August 31st, 2019. Happy training!